I can get out if I want to look professional.
Nah, you're good.
You're fine. You're fine.
You're
Welcome
okay.
back, everyone. The HiFi Summit Day 2 continues with Gary from Vanatoo.
Oh, yeah.
How are you guys doing? What's up, Gary?
Hey, glad to be here today. Thanks you guys for inviting me. So
glad to have you, man. Definitely glad to have you. It's been a fun 2 days so far. Kind of actually, we're getting near the end of the day today. But man, we're excited to have Vanatoo and yourself just sharing what you've got going on and looking forward to it. Another great seminar.
I'm a Vanatoo fan, and we have some other Vanatoo fans in here. We have Audio Architects says Vanatoo is fire.
Oh, yeah.
Eric Rollins says, I have a pair of T0s as a soundbar replacement in my living room. Such a balanced sound from such a small speaker. That's a great way to transition to what you're about to talk about.
There you go.
Hey, Derek,
fans in here.
A huge smile on my face. So that's one of the nice things about running a small business, and as you're going to hear, we are a small business, is that we actually do make connections with customers and get to talk to them, and the vast majority of the time it's a great thing. Every once in a while you get somebody's mad about something, but
sure,
way more emails, people telling us how happy we've made them, and that kind of makes your day every time. It just never gets old. So
yeah, I think you guys have like 200 employees, right? 200?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, you're going to see here all the people who work for us.
That's right.
Oh no, it's two.
Most of Amazon is working for us. So you want me to jump into it and go here?
Hey, whenever you're ready.
Okay. Well, so what I did is I put together a little PowerPoint for you guys, and it's actually an update of one that I did about 7 years ago when Vanatoo first started selling products. We gave a presentation to our local audio club who were very instrumental in early days of Vanatoo, and I went back and made some big updates to that for today. So it's got a few used slides from a couple years ago and a lot of new stuff in it. So talking to Joe before the summit, he suggested that I talk a little bit about our design and electronics and kind of how they play together. So I have a pretty geeky presentation that takes you just through the ideas of how we use the DSP and how we use some of the electronics in the speaker to get the end result that you hear. But I'll start a little bit about talking about Vanatoo. So thank you guys for introducing us. Vanatoo is really a two-person company. Myself, Gary Gesellchen, and my business partner, Rick Kernan, who can't be here today because he had a family commitment. We started the company about 10 years ago. We worked together for 20 years before that at a company that made computer printers. Rick is a software double E who was the vice president of engineering at the company, and I was a director when we decided to quit making printers and start making speakers. So we left about 10 years ago and formed Vanatoo. And we are really a two-person company. I'm the mechanical engineer, acoustics guy. Rick is the software double E, and Rick is the CEO, which really means he does the accounting. We have a lot of people that work for us, but they're all contractors. We have a very large factory in China from a company called Meilun. You see it here on the slide. There are about 10 big OEM factories in China that literally make half the speakers in all the world. We're in one of those big factories. With those guys work for us. There's a small company called Amazon that you might have heard of that's right here in my hometown of Seattle. They do a lot of our distribution and sales for us. And we have another small company called UPS that does most of the shipping. So while it's a two-person company, we literally have people all over the world that are working for us, helping us make it happen. So it's kind of funny because 15 years ago, a business like this could not exist. Rick and I had the vision to put this together, and it's been a fun ride. So tell you a little bit about the Vanatoo philosophy. We start out with the idea that we're kind of technology neutral. We don't think that there's any one thing that is any one way you have to do things. We'll do whatever we think sounds good and beats the budget. Science matters, okay? We all know that there are some things that people have not figured out how to measure in audio, and there is not complete correlation between measurements and what people prefer and all that. And you can get all kinds of people arguing over jitter and all kinds of things. But by and large, science matters. If you follow the understanding of what matters, then you're likely to get a good outcome. And we do try to apply the best science that we can to what we're doing. And the most important thing to us is quality. And I know that sounds like a very just standard thing to say, but early on in the beginning of Vanatoo, we talked to a lot of people in the industry, and the general feedback we got was that customers are stupid. They don't know what sounds good, and as long as you don't suck, you're golden. And we looked at each other and said, man, what a horrible way to run a business. We're not going to be that guy. We're going to do something that we're proud of, that makes sense to us, and we're going to try really hard to do everything we do really well. So we put that into the product design. We put that into support. We put that into emails to people. I do most of the emails when somebody's got a question, and we try to do it all well. So. Some of our influences. Most of you have probably heard the names Thiel and Small. I don't know if you know who they are, but the picture on the upper left, the shorter gentleman is Neville Thiel. He was a scientist in Australia who wrote the seminal paper on modern theory of bass reflex, ported and sealed speaker design. He released that in an Australian journal in 1960. It went largely unnoticed till about 10 years later, when the gentleman on his right, Richard Small, went to Australia to study and picked up his work and expanded on it greatly and published it in the American Journal of the Audio Engineering Society. And so that is Thiel and Small. Those are the guys that basically literally wrote the book on how you do bass design for speakers. Next guy in the middle is Wolfgang Kippel. He's the German guy who is the modern day guru of how you measure things in speakers and what matters. So if you want to know if your woofer's got a good motor in it, Klipple equipment can measure it and tell you how it works. And the factory that we work with in China, being one of the big, all this equipment is really expensive. The factory in China, being one of the big factories, has all that equipment. Whenever we need measurements, they can crank stuff out for us and show us, what we're making or what we're asking for. Next guy on the upper right is Floyd Toole. You may have heard of him. He was once the boss of Harman International, and before that ran a big acoustics chamber up in Canada. And he literally wrote the book on listener preferences, what it is that you measure versus what people like. The bottom three guys, Jerry, Joe, and Darren, are all guys from Local Audio Club. When we were putting together Vanatoo 10 years ago and we're building prototypes, we ran those by our local audio club. And these guys had a lot of feedback for us on things they wanted to see. And so we have a lot of influences on that got us here. Our basic design process is pretty simple. We have three things we do. We model what we want to build, we build it and measure it, and we listen to it. So we go around this loop of model, measure, and listen. And we do spend a lot of time in the listening side of it. And when we hear something that we don't like or don't get, we go back and try to measure what caused that and figure out in the model why that is. And in my book, good engineering always combines the theory that says you understand it with measurements that say it does what you expect it to do, and then your own experience that says you like the end result. And we went through this loop really extensively in the development of the original T1, learning how to go through that loop and how to build on it. I'll touch just a little bit on the drivers that we use in our Vanatoo speakers. By and large, they're not off the shelf. The woofers particularly, we spent a lot of effort on the Vanatoo woofers. The T1, well, says to start with the T0. The T0 uses an underhung voice coil, which is kind of uncommon in our price category. That's a voice coil where the coil is shorter than the magnetic gap, and it makes for a very linear magnetics in the motor. I designed that one myself using FEA software. The T1E uses a patented thing called an XBL voice coil, which is a dual gap thing. The local guy has a patent on it, and that makes for a very, very linear motor. The improved motor linearity does a couple of really good things for you. It gives you much better, cleaner bass performance, and particularly in the case of the T1E, that XBL motor, Dan Wiggins, the guy that has the patent on it, when they originally designed that, it was for car audio. They were 15, 20 years ago, they were some of the first people who made the really big big woofers that go in thumper cars. They did that to get more bass out of it, but it turns out that it does a remarkable job of cleaning up the mid-range as well. So that is particularly important in a two-way system where your woofer is putting out both the bass and the mids. So we spent a lot of effort in the early part of the design, making sure we have really good motors and really good suspension systems in there so that we get the linearity that we need so the thing sounds good. The tweeters are fairly close to actually being off the shelf. It's something that our vendor had that we worked to repackage to fit our application. And in the T1E's case, we did quite a bit of work on that 2 years ago when the T1E came out to convert it to aluminum dome and get what we wanted there. You saw a picture of Thiel and Small before, and if any of you have ever looked at the Thiel Small theories and are doing any speaker design, you will see that they're all based on electrical analogies. In the early days of speaker design, going back 50 or so years ago, everybody who worked on it were basically electrical engineers, and they did not have computers like we have today at their fingertips, and they understood a speaker to be a parallel of what you can do with an electrical circuit. So all of their theory was based around electrical circuits, and they have things like the moving mass of your speaker, they model it as a capacitor, and the springiness of your speaker, they model as an inductor. And I'm sorry, I'm a mechanical engineer. I can't wrap my head around that. That just never makes sense. So what you're looking at here is one example of the type of model that I use. It gives you this, it isn't significantly different than the Thiel Small in the sense that it basically gives you the same answer, but it uses real world components. So this is a mechanical diagram of springs and masses, and it includes inductors in the motor. That's for a passive radiator system. And in my model, a spring is a spring, a mass is a mass, a motor product has the right units on it, and it all fits in one mathematical model. And when you get done and you look at the results, you know what it is you're looking at. You don't have to think that, oh, that capacitor really should be a mass. It's actually a mass. So it makes it a lot easier to understand what you're really doing. So put it in my own language. We use passive radiators in the Vanatoo designs. Somebody wants to know why they're better. It's basically in a small box, you can tune it lower. You can't get the kind of bass we get out of the smaller boxes we have with a port, which is what most people will do. These two plots here are plots of displacements of the woofer being the red line and the blue line being the passive radiator. Oops, I think I just lost my picture here. Blue line being the passive radiator, and this is displacement on this axis versus frequency. And in any kind of a passive radiator or ported system, you have a displacement of woofer that kind of looks like this. At low frequencies, it's fairly high. When you get to the tuning frequency, the resonant frequency of a port or the passive radiator in a box, there's a dip in the output of the woofer, and then it rises after that. The second curve is a little harder to, and no port chuffing. Yeah, that's what you get out of a passive radiator. Lower tuning, no port chuffing. The second thing you get, or the second thing to know about how these things work is this second picture here, which is a little harder to understand, but it's the phase, okay? And phase is the relative motion of the two things. And at low frequencies, you see here that this axis is phase in degrees. So 180 degrees means exactly opposite. And what you see is at low frequencies, the woofer and the passive radiator are moving opposite each other. When one is going in, the other is going out. That's actually why a ported or passive radiator system below the tuning frequency puts out less bass than a sealed system, because the passive radiator and driver are actually fighting against each other at low frequencies and canceling each other out. But when you get up near the tuning frequency right here, the phase of the driver changes in a big hurry, and all of a sudden they're adding together. So right up here in this zone, they add together, and then you get more output. So if you add the two of them together, you get the overall frequency response. So this would be an example of a passive radiator frequency response. driven by a constant voltage. And that's important. The notion here is that if you take a normal old everyday passive speaker that you're going to hook up to your amplifier is a constant voltage device. It's going to produce whatever the speaker says it should put out. In this case, in this passive radiator system CG, there's kind of a droop in the bass when you add it up. The blue line is the woofer. So at real low frequencies, it comes up and then has a droop. At the tuning frequency, the woofer basically quits putting out sound, and all the sound's coming out of the passive radiator. And above the tuning frequency here, the two add together. So the black line is the sum of them. Down here, you can see at these low frequencies, the passive radiator and woofer are putting out about the same amount. But if you remember the previous thing, they're out of phase. So the sum of them, which is the black line, is actually less than either one of them individually because they're out of phase and canceling each other. When you get above the tuning frequency here, the two are in phase, they add together, and all of a sudden the output is greater than either one individually. So they sum up to this black line. In this case, you look at this and say, gee, we want a flat frequency response. Wouldn't we want this black line to continue straight out here before it drops? And the answer is, yeah, you would. You can't always get that, but yeah, you would. And the answer to the question of why the dip, this decrease here shown here is just a matter of the tuning. And that takes you to what we do with our Vanatoo speakers, okay? Since we have a powered speaker, we have control of the amplifier. This is the first place where our DSP comes into effect. Since we have control of the amp, we don't have to give it a constant voltage versus frequency. We can apply some equalization. There was a well-developed theory that goes back to Thiel originally in 1960, and Small elaborated on it, and others have, where it says if you take a high-pass filter, which is what this is, it doesn't put out lows, but it's got a peak in it, and you combine that with a box that's tuned a little too low, you can add the two together to flatten the bass out and get bass extension. So that's essentially what we do. We don't do it quite the way that Thiel and Small said to do it, because back in their day, they had very fixed things they can do. Our DSP gives us a lot more flexibility than what they had, so we can tweak it beyond what they could do back in the day. But it's basically the whole idea. So we take this, a response like the one I showed here, where it droops a little bit, we add a specific boost to it, and we can create something that has a nice flat pass band. And then when you get to low frequencies where your system really can't put it out, it drops down and says, I'm not going to waste my time trying to put out something that you can't do. So that's kind of what we do in the bass system. So I showed the displacements earlier. Back up here, we had the displacements up here of the driver or the woofer and the passive radiator. Once you add this filter to them, the displacements change, of course. And what you get out of displacements now looks like this. You have a woofer displacement that peaks at one frequency. This notch here is the tuning frequency of the passive radiator. So you have a woofer displacement that peaks a little bit above the tuning frequency of the passive radiator, and you have a passive radiator displacement that peaks pretty much at the tuning frequency. And those are two very distinct frequencies where you get the maximum displacement of either one of them. It turns out that's important in the design. Earlier on when I was talking about Vanatoo's woofers, I implied that we have a kind of a system level design thing. And what that really means is we're not just taking a woofer and fitting it into a box. If you're a amateur designer or hobbyist, which I was for years, you go buy a woofer and then you look up the design table and try to figure out how to make that work in your box. We don't have that constraint. We got one of the 10 biggest factories in the world working for us, and they can build anything we want. So we start out with design goals for the system. So let's take the T1E, for example. The T1E, we had a design goal of having a minus 10 dB frequency of about 40 hertz. Technically, it's 37 or 38 hertz. And 10 dB might sound like a funny number to you because everybody's used to minus 3 dB. But the reality of bass performance is what you perceive is closer to about 10 dB. So we have a minus 3 dB frequency of 48 hertz, a minus 10 dB frequency of about 38, and a T1E. We want it to play loud enough to be satisfying in a normal size room. So we want a maximum dB of about 95 dB. We had a requirement that we don't want a big box. We want it to fit on your desk. We want the thing to be 10 inches high. So we had a box size of 4 liters that we fit it to. And the amplifier we're using, we can afford about 100 watts of amp power, and we can dissipate that much heat without anything overheating. So these are our system goals. So we start with that. I'll answer the question about a floor standing model in a minute. We start with that, and you put those constraints on your design, and what you see all of a sudden is you have a design that's a little bit constrained, but in fact, there are still an infinite number of ways you can do it. These constraints don't say, oh, here's the answer. There's still an infinite number of things you can do. So the question is, how do you get there from there? With regard to the question that popped up a minute ago about have we considered a floor stander, the answer is yes. We've actually built things like it. I have a really nice MTM sitting in my room right now that I was just looking at over here that I listen to on a daily basis that I love. Question is, does it make you money? Right? We are a business. Costs a lot of money to put into something like that, and we're not altogether sure we make money doing it. So you guys give me the feedback and tell me what you want. Maybe we could do something there. So I said a minute ago that even though you put some constraints on your design, there's still no one way to do it. So we step back to this system level thing, and we look at it and we say, well, it turns out when you're designing the bass portion of your speaker, the 3 things that limit your bass output are the displacement of the woofer, the displacement of the passive radiator, and how much power you have to pump into it. Power and efficiency, those kind of swap places. In the last, I built my first speaker when I was in high school, and I'm not going to tell you how long ago that was, but you can kind of get a guess. It wasn't yesterday. Over the years, I managed to do enough work with speaker models that I've kind of figured out a way to do a proprietary optimization of them. So we have this model that we use that we have never actually divulged to the world that says that we know how to take all of those available things, the displacements, the power, the size of the box, the frequency response you want, and come up with a solution that says this, given these constraints, this is the one unique solution that's the best you can do. And theoretically, you can't do better. The T0 was the first speaker that we did that on a few years ago. The T1E's got a slightly improved version of it. And it is theoretically the best you can do. It doesn't mean you can't take a box our size and put more power into it and get more out of it. But the combination of things we have, it's the best you can do. And you can do a lot worse than what we do. It's always easy to do worse. It's not so easy to do better. So the DSP, the question of how we marry electronics together with design, the DSP is what gives us our ability to tweak that bass like that and make them match so that we get the best output. And this is the optimization I was talking about. It's actually done in Excel. If anybody's an Excel user, Excel's solver module has a really, really good mathematical optimization engine built into it. Much better than you might think just from a everyday product from Microsoft. So what this model does is we have a response target that we want to hit. It will say, gee, you're going to have to put in this much voltage and this much power over here. And here's the displacements of your passive radiator and your woofer. And you can combine all those together such that it gives you an optimized design that says, oh, you got this much voltage, this size of box, you can do this and this and this and this. So it's pretty fun. And this little thing here that I'm showing you is, again, proprietary. We haven't really shared it with anybody, but it's probably the best piece of work I've done in quite a few years. Beyond using the DSP built into the unit for getting the bass and adjusting things, we also use it in the crossover. So both the Transparent 0 and the Transparent 1 Encore are bi-amped designs, meaning that every woofer and every tweeter has their own amplifier, and the crossover between them is done in the DSP. The advantages of that is that you can the DSP, you don't have to have a flat response of your amplifier. Again, you can make your amplifier have any response you want to get the response you want in the end out of the combined system. And you can do that with a passive crossover to some extent, but the flexibility of what you can do with a passive crossover is a lot more limited, and you end up with an awful lot of parts, and actually at the end of the day, they cost more money. And you can get a lot more accurate and repeatable thing out of the DSP. Passive crossovers are affected by the impedance of a speaker, and that impedance actually changes as the speaker is running. When you're running your speaker hard and playing loud versus quietly, it's got a different impedance, and the crossover doesn't behave the same. That isn't true in the DSP world. In the DSP world, it doesn't care. It does the same thing all the time. You have time compensation you can put into your DSP that you can't do passively. And when you get all done, it just sounds better. It's just a better way of doing things. So that's another thing that DSP does for us. And here's an example of the T0. If you take a transparent zero and mount it on a stand and way away from everything and measure the woofer and the tweeter with a flat amplifier response going into it, this is what you'll see. Not awful, certainly not flat. No drivers are, and this has cabinet diffraction and everything else in it. So we start off with drivers that look like that in our cabinet. Here's the voltage we end up driving the woofer with, and again, it's nowhere near flat voltage. We can do that with a DSP. Here's the voltage you drive the treater with. You combine those two together with the driver responses, and voila, you end up with a pretty nice flat response here. You might wonder, gee, what in the world is this? You said you got a flat response and you got this goofy dip here. Okay, well, this is something that virtually everybody in our market does. We can take this and make it come back flatter and get rid of that dip in there if we want to. And in fact, in both the transparent zero and the transparent one encore, when you switch between the default configuration of shelf to the flat configuration, which you can do in our configuration setups, it does fill this bump in here quite a bit. But the reason this is here is because most people who use our transparent zero or transparent one encore are not going to set them on a stand out in the middle of the room way away from everything. They're going to put them near a wall someplace because that's what fits in their room. That's the real world of how people live. And what you see is you get a lot of room gain in this low frequency zone from being near boundaries. So the reason the dip is here is to anticipate how people are going to use it and make it sound the best in the most number of places. And then beyond there, of course, you have bass and treble controls you can adjust from there. But this little dip in here is there on purpose because when you put it up near a wall somewhere, it's going to actually sound flatter. If this thing came straight out and then dropped, if you put it in most places people are going to use it, it would end up sounding boomy. So inside the speaker, let me take a drink here. So those are some things we do with the DSP. It helps run the bass system. It can be programmed for different things in the bass. And on top of that, there's also a microprocessor in the electronics. It's completely separate from the DSP. That microprocessor is a thing that pays attention to, I'm reading a question here. The microprocessor basically is the thing that reads the knobs for volume and treble and bass. It stores information on the configurations you have set up, and it does our automated input switching. This is one of Rick's proprietary circuits. Rick, the other half of Vanatoo, is a really good double E. Guy knows his stuff. And in the original transparent one that we came out with about 8 years ago, we had automated switching there, but we had an issue where, particularly with USB, when you plug your computer into the speaker over USB, it's always, the USB is always talking to the speaker whenever the speaker's powered on and the computer's powered on. There's a constant string of information going back and forth there. And if your input switching only says, gee, is USB connected? The answer is yes. But you don't know if USB is playing any music or not. You just know that it's turned on. Rick figured out a very smart way of determining if there is music there, not just a connection. So the transparent 0 and transparent 1 Encore have this enhanced thing we call digital silence detection that can look at the digital inputs, not only tell that they're there, but they can tell if there's music on them. And again, our dedicated microprocessor helps do that. So there's a hierarchy of inputs, and it says, gee, if I'm on a lower input and something comes in with music on a higher input, I'll switch off and go to that one. I had a question a minute ago that came in about how do you deal with the difference between measured results and modeled results, and is it a crapshoot, and do they ever agree? And the answer is that in my world, they agree really well. We have models that they're not unique to us. You know, I mean, there's a lot of people who've done some science to this who we built on. But basically, the model that I showed you earlier and the way that I've implemented it through the base range of our speakers, so from down to 20 hertz up to probably 300 or 400, 500 hertz, the agreement that I get between measurement and model is within 1 or 2 dB over that entire range. It's really good. So if your model's right and you've measured all your parameters, your speaker right, and you really know the size of your box and all that stuff, the models in real world agree really, really well. So the other thing we use the microprocessor and DSP for is what we call our smart sub out. And again, this isn't a sales pitch. It's supposed to be a sciencey thing. But the nice thing about the smart sub output is that the first smart part of it's really pretty dumb. It's literally the RCA jack on the back of the speaker has a switch in it. When you plug in your subwoofer, it flips the switch and it knows there's something in. At that point, when you plug it in, it says, hey, I don't need to put out bass anymore. I've got help. The speaker switches the DSP routine, takes the bass out of this little speaker, sends it to the sub where it belongs. Now the sub is putting out all the bass. The little speaker doesn't have to put out bass anymore, so it can play louder. So you get better bass and you can play louder. And on top of that, the fact that the woofer in the little Vanatoo speakers isn't working so hard anymore, it just sounds better. It doesn't have to, it's not going to distort. It's not limited by anything anymore, so it can play a lot louder. So that's pretty much the story that I had for you today. The point, I think, is that powered speakers, as we go about it, they really are a system level endeavor. You don't just start with a woofer and try to fit it in a box and then wonder how much power you're going to use. You start with an overall design goal of, I want to have a box of a certain size. I want to have a frequency limit that goes a certain depth. I want to play this loud. And then you design around meeting those goals from the very beginning. And it involves, in this case, it involves the design of the passive radiator, the design of the woofer, the design of the box, the design of the amplifier. All of that stuff has to be taken into account up front. So we have a design pretty much in hand before we ever go to the factory to say, here's what we need part-wise. And I don't know if you saw on the very first slide when I talked about our drivers, but on the original transparent one, and the transparent one Encore is essentially the same woofer the transparent one used. We went through 15 iterations of woofer to get to the one that we now have. So even though we knew what we wanted, still getting the one you want takes a while. You got to tweak some things and get the right response and get the right sound that you're looking for. So it takes a lot to get there, but once you get there, it's worth it. So once you look at it at a system level thing, there are ways to actually optimize it, and you can put out what's truly an optimized design. Takes a lot of electronics and software to realize that, but in my book, when you get done, the results are worth it. I was reading from, I think it was actually PS Audio the other day, from Paul from PS Audio, who was talking about technical accuracy and how everything works. And he said at the end of the day, he'll take something that makes his toe tap over something that's technically accurate any day. And that's kind of what happens in our world. We measure all this stuff. We model all this stuff. We make sure it all works together. But at the end of the day, in this room that I'm talking to you right now, which is my family room and where I prove out a lot of this stuff, if I don't get up and start singing and dancing around to the music, then I got more work to do. So that's kind of how we go at it. So Joe and company, that's sort of my pitch.
Gary, that's
company we want to talk to.
That's been fantastic. I know I've been monitoring the chat, and a lot of great comments here from HiFi. Haven looks like another brand of speakers I'll have to take a look at. There was another one here, like right after that. Great looking desktop. So, but I also saw a lot of questions that came in, and so I'd love to, if it's okay with you, if you got some time, we'll actually go through some of those.
I'm happy to.
That sound good?
I see one right here. It says, where did the name come from?
Yes, that was asked several times. I'm glad you're going to address that. So how did we come up with Vanatoo?
So Rick and I, being the founders of Vanatoo, we worked together. Again, I think I said we had worked together for 20 years just before we started Vanatoo. And just as we're getting ready to quit our old jobs, we're like, what are we going to call this thing? There was a website at the time that talked about the happiest places on Earth. And the island nation of Vanatoo in the South Pacific was billed on this website as being the happiest place on Earth, where people are the most in tune with each other and their environment. And Rick and I looked at that and said, gee, wouldn't you like your company to be the happiest place on Earth? And so we changed the spelling around a little bit, and
there you go.
Vanatoo.
Vanatoo.
Turns out the happiest place on Earth is not Disneyland.
Exactly.
That's me on the left and Rick on the right. So this is a trip we took to the factory in China about 2 years ago when we were doing.
You guys look pretty happy right here.
Yeah.
Hey, when you make it to Hong Kong and then get through the border into China and finally get to the factory after about a 3.5 hour van ride, you don't know where you are. You're happy when you get there. So
yeah. So we got some. I've checked out both of these. I've done reviews on both of these. This is you at a Expona doing a presentation, and Transparent One Encore are the bigger ones. I've reviewed these. These are a big seller. I know a lot of people like these because of the price. These are $359.
Yeah, that's the ones I reviewed. Sounds really, really sweet.
You checked out the Transparent One Encores.
That's right. You're right.
It was the Encore.
You're right. You're right.
The T0s are smaller ones,
That's
and these are
like
crazy. Yeah. And actually, let's see here. Oh, let me see. I was gonna say you guys are actually doing a giveaway. Very generous of you guys. So there's a lot of people who are interested in this. You guys are doing a giveaway here at the HiFi Summit, and you're giving away 5 pairs of transparent zeros.
5 pairs
Nice.
of zeros.
Awesome.
Woo woo.
When Joe called us,
5
we wanted to participate, we're like, you know what? Let's go big or go home. So
That's
I'm
awesome.
gonna add another one here because it says visit Vanatoo's website and follow you on Facebook. I'm gonna follow them on Instagram as another way to enter, because I want people to go to your Instagram. I've been bugging you to be on Instagram because you know why? I'll tell you why. Because you have so many fans out there that you might not even know that are like, I have some new speakers. I just got them. I love them, and I want to take a picture and tag you, but you didn't have an Instagram. So, I think
you've inspired me, Joe. I'm gonna have to behave better. So
inspired or coerced or forced. I don't know which word you want to use.
Maybe a little bit.
So to beat Mania in the Transparent One Encore, again, there's 4 amplifiers. Each woofer can have up to 100 watts going to it.
Does that include the tweeter?
But
the tweeter can have 100 watts
per channel. The woofers can have up to 100 watts going to each of them. It is actually the same amp that runs the tweeters, but the tweeters are a lot more efficient, and they will never see anywhere near that much power. And the equivalent in the Transparent Zero is 48 watts. So the Zero can put 48 watts into the woofer, into the individual woofer. The One has 100 watts available.
So I know when you're presenting, it's hard to kind of read the chats, and it's probably more so for everybody watching. And then we would come back to it, but we had a lot of love apparently for the larger speakers. Ooh, gets me excited. And so there were a lot of seemed like some smiles over there on that side. So here's a good question, maybe to any idea on what that
was?
was?
On the spot.
Yeah,
We're gonna hold you to it.
Yeah.
So a couple of issues we've had with the larger one is just we sell more zeros than we do one encores.
Yeah.
And a larger one's going to be more expensive, and
Sure.
question how many we're really going to sell.
Yeah.
And they're going to really need to fit the home theater world better, I think, because when you get into a larger powered system, somebody's going to want to use it with their TV.
Yeah.
And you start getting problems where people want to use surround sound, and frankly, powered speakers and surround sound are kind of a tough combination. So there's in the real world, there's some things around that we can make a kick-ass speaker. That's not a problem. But you get into some real world issues of how people can use them, and is it going to work the way they want, and are they going to pay the money for it? So
sure. Joe, was this your comment here?
Where?
Zero was why is it not a rectangular box? Why is it a funny shape? The reason it's a funny shape is so that when you set it on your desk, it points up toward your ears instead of shooting at your chest. Most desktop speakers, you put them on your desk, the sound is banging in the chest, and that's not any good. Mm-hmm. So the triangular shape is to get it pointing at your ears primarily. It's cool. It looks, well, it's obviously a matter of opinion, but most people seems to like it. So
real quick, so here's Vanatoo's Instagram, Vanatoo2U. You guys go and follow that. I've actually added that as another way to enter. Okay, so cool. If you guys have entered the giveaway,
show them some love, man.
Go back and do the Instagram one too. Follow them on here, Vanatoo2U, and let's make that happen. I want to share one more thing here. It's here. Let me just show you guys the transparent zeros. Boom.
Yeah, go ahead and do that. I'm on.
Transparent 359. Look at these.
I heard those. Did you show those at the Audio Expo in Florida Audio Expo? Do you know?
We were there in Tampa, not this year, but year before last.
2 years ago. That's the first time I saw them. Yep.
So many inputs. Now, a question for you, Gary. Are you still doing those cutouts that say Vanatoo on the desktop pads?
That's on the transparent zero, yeah. That comes.
Yeah, I was like, how are you guys affording to do all this custom stuff for $359? I don't even understand it. That's crazy.
You got to have a way to keep them from sliding around the desk, and whenever you put something hard on your desk, even the smallest little piece of sand will scratch everything in sight. But the real reason for those is to make them not slide around and to protect the surfaces so you don't ruin anything. And the idea that we put our name on them, it just reminds you what you're listening to. So it's
so cool, though. I mean, you didn't have to do that. So I was saying, you're saying you didn't want it to be a sales pitch. I didn't also want it to be a sales pitch, but I like to promote stuff that I like.
Yeah,
it's
easy to.
So I can't help
it. That. Yeah, absolutely.
I have to say something, and I think you guys are providing an awesome value here. Did you see my comment? You said you're looking at different things to make. I think you guys would do well, and you guys in the comments let me know if I'm on the right track. But DSP Vanatoo sub, a smallish one that can go along with your T0 or T1E would make sense to me, because DSP, and the fact that yours does the smart switching for the sub, or you plug in the sub, it automatically does the high pass. Kind of makes sense. All in one. I don't know. Sub can make
Yeah, we have spent a lot of time looking at, I'm the nerd speaker guy, right? I mean, I like speakers, so I have looked at about everything you can imagine. And I have a couple of subs in my basement that I built that work pretty well. The question, again, it's a business question of, can you sell it? And there's a lot of subs on the market that are $300 that don't suck. And we got to do something better than them. And it's hard for people to know if they've done better or not. So it's
yeah. Well, you make the awesome products, right? So as long as the product is awesome, I always tell people it's so easy to sell a product that's great. Very difficult to sell a product that sucks.
Yeah.
Because when it's great, you just tell them as it is. Like, this is what it does. It really is awesome, and done deal.
Well, we've had some ideas. We've had some ideas about how to do a sub and make it a little bit unique. So,
a question.
Here's a couple questions for you.
There you go. Here's a technical question.
The crossover. So we don't use first or third order or Butterworth. Actually, the crossover between the woofer and the tweeter in both of our speakers, in the transparent 0, it's an 8th order crossover. And it's a Linkowitz-Riley is technically the slopes of the roll off of the crossover is Linkowitz-Riley. So it's an 8th order in the transparent 0. It's 6th order in the 1 encore.
Wow.
So the reason we use the steeper orders is, one, we have the DSP, so we can do it. Trying to do that with passive things, it takes a whole lot of parts. And the DSP doesn't take anything. And it allows you to push the crossover point lower and not overdrive the tweeter. And lower crossover points better in terms of off-axis response and all those things. So it's 8th order in the T0, 6th order in T1E.
Cool.
As far as colors go, black's the most universal color for
black on black.
That's the
T1E comes in cherry veneer. We looked at making white T0s, but you get into a question of, well, what's white? Does the woofer frames are painted black? Do we have to have special white paint?
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll probably sell.
Think about that with white.
I have a white desk right here.
Do we need white surrounds? I mean, different colors. So
it's that Stormtrooper look. You know what I mean? Just called Stormtrooper. What color?
There you go.
S Trooper. Just put it at that. That's marketing for you. And then HiFi Haven says I'm on the right trail. Yeah, they should make a sub, shouldn't they? I haven't seen a good small sub, to be honest. Like one that gets. I want it to get down to like 20 hertz. So whatever size. Can you make an 8-inch sub that can get down to 20?
You can make a 4-inch sub plays 20 hertz.
Really?
Just how loud you want it to play.
Well,
I need one for my desk. Let me say it like this. Here.
Made for the desk, so I'm not trying to go crazy levels, but I want it to hit low.
Yeah.
I'll be honest. Just a thought. If you could do it with a 6.5, that'd be even better.
I'll give away an idea. If we have somebody listening in who's one of my competitors, maybe I'll give away an idea they'll steal from me.
Go.
Since I don't know we're going to do it anyway, I'll throw it out there and see if we get any feedback.
Okay.
What I said earlier is we haven't made our own sub because there's just so many of them out there. How in the world do you stand out?
Yeah, sure.
If you take the electronics that are in a T1E, we have 4 channels of amplifier. We can take those electronics, use 2 channels to drive the sub. We have 2 more channels left over. We can build a subwoofer that is a 2.1 system where the sub is just a sub, but you plug your inputs into it, and now you can hook up any passive set of speakers to it.
Like go there.
And let the sub be the sub.
Do that. Please do that.
That's funny.
Please do that.
Do it.
Think about that. Like all the electronics are in the sub, so you're buying a sub, and then you're like, "Hey, I got these like
pair with what you got."
Okay, so our current Vanatoo.com. You need to email my business partner.
Please,
Joe
the other
funded.
thing somebody mentioned is
Kickstarter.
Consider doing a Kickstarter.
Yeah, Kickstarter.
Like, hey, kickstart it, and if people want it, then let's make it happen.
We've thought about that. Everything. What little bit I know about a crowdfunding campaign is if you're gonna do a crowdfunding campaign, you got to do it. I mean, it is a major project in and of itself. Everything I've heard about those is they're great, but you gotta
just do it, baby. That's funny.
Just do it.
That's fantastic.
What's the email? Oh man,
Sheila Woofer, he wants my my new subwoofer, huh?
He wants you to do it.
Wow, that's great. I would love for something like that. I think it would just look. This is what I care about. Is I told you guys, I'm like, I support you guys. I just like you guys. When I met you, I'm like, these guys are cool, making great products. What else can you ask for? And at an affordable price, so anybody can get into it. I think you're getting a lot of people into this hobby, right? I'm not sure if you realize that.
Yeah.
And one of the, I don't know if this is worth anything to anybody, but I had an experience about 2 months ago where I answered the phone and I says hello, and the guy on the other end of the phone's like, didn't say anything. I'm like, hello, and the guy says, you said hello. I'm like, yeah,
right.
That's what my mom taught me to do.
That's what these phone calls are about.
You don't get it. I've not called a business in 20 years and had anybody say hello. Like,
Or what?
Yeah.
Hello, you're
Hello, this is Vanatoo. How can
So
I
that's
help
what-
you?
There's a question for you.
How do you compensate for the phase shift of your crossover? We have the ability to delay or woofer the tweeter. There's time delay built into the DSP. You can delay if you need to. So basically, you line up the acoustic centers in time, and then the phase of the crossover. I mean, if you're really building like a Linkowitz-Riley crossover and your acoustic centers are aligned, then the phases kind of take care of themselves. So you gotta tie all the different pieces together. But once you tie them all together, it all works out. That probably sounds like a cop-out answer, but it's sort of the truth. So.
Yeah, crowdfunding tends to require a bit of a hype train to drive it.
Mhm.
Choo-choo, I got it. I got you. Vanatoo, let's go.
But he says, you can do it.
I can make it happen. Let's go.
I've got 3 guys here working with me that know how to get attention. So,
hey, I have a question that I kind of know the answer to, but you mentioned Klipple, and that's they make that crazy measurement device or speakers, and so how does that help you make a better speaker?
The main Klipple stuff that we've used at the factory are what they call their large signal thing for woofers, basically. And inside the design of the woofer, how strong the motor is varies. How much oomph the motor puts out varies as the woofer cone travels in and out. You want that to be very constant. Klipple can basically measure that and tell you how constant it is. And most speakers, it's not very constant. That's why we use the XBL motor in the T1E and the underhung voice coil that I designed for the T0. Those magnetic topologies basically give you a lot more constant force. They can also measure how stiff the springiness of the speaker is as it moves back and forth, and how the inductance varies. So there's just a whole bunch of stuff in there that they can measure that has an effect on the distortions and how it's all going to go together.
But it's also doing stuff like figuring out like the off-axis response, right? How it measures off-axis.
Yeah, this part's more just about the bass response and does it fall apart when you turn it up?
Right. So Kanga says he knows it's a linear.
That up until the point where you start running out of gas from the amplifier, the sound doesn't change that much. It doesn't fall apart. So.
Other question earlier was kind of similar to this, so I'll build on this question here, and it was also questions for why aluminum versus soft dome, why the change?
Yeah, so the answer is that I like hard domes. I don't think it's an earth-shattering thing one way or the other. There's a lot of things in audio that people argue with forever, and I'm not one of those guys.
Cables,
but I tend to think that hard dome things, hard transducers, if you keep them below their breakup modes, tend to give a cleaner, crisper sound, in my opinion. And so we switched to the aluminum dome in the T1E. The original silk dome we had in the T1 had a little more variation from unit to unit than we liked. Working with the factory, they suggested that aluminum dome would have less variation. In fact, it's got a little better high frequency output. So we switched to it there because we just thought it sounded better and had a little more consistency to it.
Here was one from earlier from Kanga. Are they powered before or after the DSP and crossover?
Before. Everything's done at low level in the amp, and then the driver output stages are there. I saw a question come in about pros and cons of the T0 and T1E. They're really similar. That question come up. So to Noah, they're very similar. They sound like siblings because they're designed by the same people with a lot of the same ideas. The biggest difference you notice right away is just the physically larger size of the T1E. It has a lot better bass. The T0 is no slouch for a dinky little speaker, and the T1E isn't very big either, but it has a lot better bass than its little brother. It's a little sweeter in the mids and highs to my ears, and it's got some more features and things in it that we don't have in the it's you can adjust the subwoofer from your chair and some things like that. So
do you still sell the ISO acoustic stuff? Because I remember Chana, do you remember when you had the T1Es and it was like walking off the desk?
Oh yeah. I was playing that through my drum machine. I was making some new drum machine patterns, and those things were just
they were walking, man.
they're just moving. I'm like, wow.
Oh, that you noticed that too, right, Michael?
Yes, I did say that because
that's what the playing, feeder, that's what the feeder for is, try to keep them from moving around. But
yeah, I had just put them in my in the theater room on the thing, and I was cranking them up. Into my review, I'm like, man, these things are moving, dude. I mean, it was kicking for a little speaker. Pretty awesome.
So what other speakers do I have in my home? Well,
and he says like the one behind you.
Most of the time right now is most of last year I listened to a set of T1Es and a RSL speed woofer subwoofer. That was the combination I had in my room for most of last year, and boy, I really liked it. For this year, most of what I've been listening to is the MTMs that I built. Let me
exclusive.
Oh, check it. Here, hang on 1 second. 1 second. Here we go.
World premiere here at the HiFi Summit.
I'm trying to make him.
So you can't buy this, and you're probably not going to get to. But here we go.
Trying to make him big, man.
Look at what you're.
Make Gary big. There it is.
Look at the wave guide on that thing.
Oh yeah, look at there.
So this has got a.
We're gonna get hit.
This is an aluminum treater in the middle, and the same woofer that we have in the T1E top and bottom.
Nice.
And then a couple of really nice.
Two.
Yeah.
Ah.
Damn.
Okay.
Those guys have a real honest to God bass down into the low 30 hertz. They sound. I'm very biased, but pretty awesome. So
that's awesome, man.
Good job, SI.
You saw it here first.
I'm gonna do a screenshot of that.
Boom.
You guys seen this? You can't buy these. You can't buy these. Sorry.
And I said earlier that it's tough to put powered speakers in a surround sound, which is one of the reasons we haven't built a bigger thing, because everybody wants them to work in a surround sound format.
Sure.
My daily listening for TV is, I hate to say this, but it's a set of Infinities that were cheap, sound pretty good, and just a cheaper and a set of Infinity surround sound stuff.
You seem like you would like some Revel stuff or something.
I would. But,
you seem like you would.
Like most of the users of my Vanatoo stuff, I'm not that rich, And you guys start buying more speakers, I can't afford it. So.
Hey, I have an idea for you then. Just because we're just messing. All right, so I talk to you all the time, a good amount of time. So here's what I would like. How about if you made that sub, right? Make it bigger and make it get down to 20 hertz, right? Make that sub, and then with the outputs that you're talking about, and make some passive versions. No, you can't do that because you have to do all the crossover stuff. Never mind. Bad idea. Ignore that. That would take a lot.
A little light bulb went off in Gary's head. You probably inspired a different idea. Who knows?
On there, so.
Yeah, passive would take a long time to develop because you got to do the whole crossover. Yeah,
those speakers, the MTMs you're looking at aren't passives. They're run with we use a set of off-the-shelf amps and a mini DSP for prototyping things. So it's got a couple of big Adcom amps hooked to it with the mini DSP doing the crossovers and the bass correction and all that. And so it's got plenty of power going to it, but it
nice.
It works really nice. They make me very, very happy. So
make an 18-inch subwoofer.
Dual 8s on the side, I'm assuming.
Yeah, the 8s are the passive radiators, so it's just being driven by the two T1E woofers.
Nice.
And it doesn't play super duper loud.
Sure.
When you're getting down into the 30 hertz range, you have 2 5.25-inch woofers. It won't play super loud, but it plays loud enough to be.
It can reproduce the notes.
And the bottom end of it is, it's really pretty. Every time I listen to it, I just shake my head. I'm like, wow. There's just, I got a 19-year-old son who likes hip hop, right? And he never tells me anything sounds good, right? He's 19.
Right.
And he's like, Dad, you should make those. Those sound good.
Oh, that's awesome, man.
I think if we can get your Instagram to like over 1,000, then let's consider doing a Kickstarter.
Oh,
there you go.
Fluid as a YouTube.
That's a little.
And then
kind of a push.
I'm always like pushing the agenda.
And then
I'll help you promote. I just want to see those.
Yeah.
Anyway, our time is up.
Yeah.
Yep.
Gary, it's
Anything
been a
else you want to
pleasure,
do
man.
or plug or anything, Gary?
Gary, you're definitely an audio OG.
Yeah,
Original
definitely. Very great and good, amazing information. Everybody loved the story about your name and everything. And I think somebody was like, "Does Vanatoo stand for Vanna White too?" I guess I don't know. I saw that and that's hilarious.
I think Tristan said this company and seminar just made my day. So cool.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys. It's been fun.
Good stuff, man.
We like what we do. You know, we started the business not because we're trying to get rich, and thank God we knew that wasn't likely, but because it's something that we cared about and wanted to do. And my partner and I are both kind of techno geeks to start with. You know, we're engineers to our core. We're not great marketing guys. We're engineers.
That's
and
what we're here for.
We started it because we thought there was a lot of cool tech. You know, we started right around the time the iPhone came out, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's, you put things in perspective. And we thought there was a lot of cool technology out there that you could integrate in a way we hadn't seen other people do. Sure. And so we went off to go make the dream, and here we are. So
living the dream, man. Congratulations.
Okay.
Well, thank you, Gary. You've been awesome.
Okay. Thanks, guys. Look forward to talking to you in the future, and look forward to see how the rest of the summit goes. It's a great idea. So
thanks, Gary.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Gary.
Thanks, guys.
All right, everyone. The HiFi Summit Day 2 is wrapping up. Don't forget, we have the after party in about an hour. And what's that, Mike?
I was gonna say, crank it up, man. It's time to crank it up.
We're gonna get it sounding better this time. We figured it out.
Yeah, we figured out what the issue was, and then I got my lights on stands, so no more lights falling down.
They're on lockdown.
They are on lockdown.
Hey, I would encourage you guys. We had a great conversation over in the lobby in the video chat, and so kind of like what we're doing here with Gary, just kind of hanging out. I mean, that's one of the things that we wanted to convey in this is us having a conversation with these brands and the great products they have and the great wealth of knowledge that they have to kind of impart to us. But come hang out with us in the chat, and be glad to do
I'm
that.
actually going to jump in the video chat while I'm setting up for the after party.
Yeah.
So,
we figured out what it was. It's because he was streaming the StreamYard, and StreamYard is only expecting us to talk like this. It was not.
So that it was squashing the bass.
Yeah.
Squashing the bass. We don't want to squash the bass. We want to bump the bass, right?
We want to feel the bass.
Well, very cool.
Whoa.
Let's
using the boyfriend voice. You gotta feel
Gary,
the bass.
Gary, stick around just for a second afterwards so I can say hi, or
Yeah.
afterwards.
All right. So for all the attendees, we'll see you real shortly. The journey to the top continues.
To the top.